Agriculture, the most sensitive area, sensitive area affected by climate change, or one of the most sensitive areas. In what way, and are we seeing more people affected by climate change in sensitive agricultural areas?
It is the most sensitive sector to climate change. Why? Because rise in temperature affects rainfall patterns, and of course agriculture depends on the weather. And what we're seeing with change in climate is change in farming systems, change in rainfall belts. We're seeing some of the major crops reaching their high temperature threshold at night times. You've seen the pictures from the UNFCCC about the forecast reductions in yields across the globe. This in a context where we're forecasting 7 billion people goes to 9 billion by 2050. We need to double world food production in developing countries on that time scale in an environment that's going to become increasingly harsh.
Are we seeing this just in developing countries, or are we seeing this happening also in developed countries?
Well, in developed countries as well, but developed countries are less dependent on their agricultural sector. Here in Africa, agriculture is the biggest employer. In most countries, it's their biggest export sector and the biggest employer. So here on African soil, we're especially sensitive to climate change and agriculture.
So obviously, we're, as we all are, waiting to reach some kind of agreement on lowering the rate of carbon emissions. But in the meantime, and it could be a very long meantime, what can you do to lessen the effects on those worst affected?
Well, we've just come out of President Zuma's opening address, where he called for global solutions to this global challenge. And global solutions means we've got to include in these climate change negotiations the big sectors, on the one hand contributing to greenhouse gases, and please remember that land use contributes around a third of greenhouse gases. Land use, I mean deforestation, problems, change in land use, which is 18%, and then 14% from agriculture itself. Hugely important sector, hitherto ignored in climate change negotiations. And as I said before, the sector that's most vulnerable. So as some say, it's the victim and also one of the big villains. And what we got to do is convert that, turn it around so it's part of the solution.
I find that remarkable. You say that agriculture was excluded from previous negotiations. So have we come to the issue of agriculture late?
Well, some of the negotiators are pressing that agriculture and land use should be part of a so-called working group of the subsidiary body on science technology advice. This is a way now to move to include it in the negotiations. We won't know for a few days whether it gets in there. There are more voices in favor of that than there were in Cancun. The reason it's been excluded is up to 5-10 years ago, it was difficult to monitor how to measure that agricultural contribution. We know that it's huge, but it's one thing to measure the output of a big power station in North America. It's another to monitor what smallholder farmers are doing in the developing world.
And you can do that now, can you?
Now, with remote sensing technology, what we know about soil science, we have solutions. We need to do more work on them so as to bring land use into the mitigation debate. And that's why this strong recommendation, you've seen the badges, no agriculture, no deal, why many countries, many African countries especially, want agriculture now to be part of the debate.
And does it look like it's going, I see you won't know for a few days, but does it look like it's going in that direction? Do people, those who make these decisions, appear to be waking up to the facts?
Let me explain that in Mexico, there were not so many voices, but there were voices. And it was blown away by the negotiators because agriculture remained in the same sector of the text as bunker fuels. Now, the negotiating member states find it difficult to agree on power, industry, and trade, and that's why it was in a controversial element and it didn't survive the negotiations in Cancun. So we're more hopeful with more voices that agriculture will be included in the negotiations. And let me explain to you something, just talking to one of the negotiators now. He said, what is all this stuff about smallholder agriculture? You know, many of the member states do not realize the sheer numbers of people involved, that there are 500 million smallholder farms on the planet, supporting with their families 2 billion people. So that's a third of the human race. Put it another way, in the farmland here in sub-Saharan Africa and Asia, 80% of it is smallholder farms. Tremendous number of people involved, hugely vulnerable, and that's why, as Zuma again has just said to the negotiators, that you must not disappoint the people of the world.